I'm excited to talk to you about compassion because you covered a lot of ground. And compassion, I know for myself and talking and working with others in similar kinds of topics, compassion brings us to a place where you actually talked about it requiring courage. And I could feel that because there's places where we become guarded in intimate relationships with our children, with our family members, even with good friends. And that kind of guarding totally makes it difficult to experience empathy, as you brought up, and compassion. And so I'd like to talk about some examples with our children in parenting where it's difficult to come to this place of compassion and empathy, and maybe walking through some of this with me of how we get there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to stick with the example of kind of imagining myself with children. Was a kid, friends with lots of kids, where my child is in sports or wants to, is now playing sports, has chosen to take up tennis, and is really good at it. I think they're excelling at it. They're burning out on it and they want to quit.
Okay.
And I'm having a hard time with that because I think they really got something going on here. I mean, they've been, I'm kind of borrowing from some friends who have shared a very similar story. They're actually having scouts checking them out, possible scholarship. This would be great, hugely beneficial for college and beyond, potentially. But they're really not into it anymore.
Huge benefits if they kept going. And
Yeah.
so that's hard for you to step away from.
Yeah,
To have your child step away from.
yeah, I think they could be making a bad decision for
Yeah.
their future. There's so much potential here to get them to lots of places.
Well, let's maybe kind of walk through that scenario and take a look at how would we apply those 3 steps we talked about.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So the first step, we want to identify any agenda items, judgments, or barriers. So let's start with agenda. So when we look at this scenario, what agenda items might you have if you're working with a child like this?
Well, I know in a big sense, immediately my agenda is around their future and them even thinking about their future. I have an agenda that they need to be thinking, maybe that's even a judgment, I don't know, this kind of piece that they need to be thinking about their future. They're almost done with high school now, and it's time for college. So I guess I have an agenda that they should be going to college next, and that they should be probably doing some certain things when they finish high school and thinking about that now.
Yeah, what an interesting concept, right? You're planning their life for them.
Yes.
So your agenda is planning their life for them and deciding what is best for them. And not only that, you're judging what is or isn't best for them, or what they should or should not be doing. So those are all agenda and judgment. So first off, right, that great job on identifying those. And I normally like to look at what happens if you proceed with that. So if you proceed with that agenda and judgment at the forefront of your mind, how are you going to talk with the child?
Well, even if I try to mask it, it's going to come through because I can tell that, of course, there's, I see some things as more valuable. Some decision they might have, or some decision I think they should make is more valuable, or is better in some way than another decision that might matter to them. As I say it out loud, yeah.
And, having these conversations, it's identifying that agenda and putting it on hold. It doesn't mean that it necessarily goes away, and it doesn't mean that your opinion doesn't matter. The reality is, though, is if you put your agenda out there and start telling them, well, you're going to lose your scholarship and your future is going to go to crap. You have all these opportunities that I never had, and it's going to impact your life for the rest of your life, right? If we start speaking that way and our agenda comes out like crazy, we might shut our kid down or create a fight, or they might start pushing back and even stronger not want to do tennis. And then there's some kids out there that might even do passive aggressive things where you drop them off for tennis practice and then they walk off and go somewhere else, right? So a lot of behaviors start coming out as soon as we push our agenda on somebody instead of allowing space to talk about what theirs is.
As you're describing that, I actually can think of other stories are coming to mind from friends and their kids where they did actually it manifested in these different ways as you're talking about, where either the passive aggressive direction of it, or perhaps shutting down, or
Mhm.
other ways.
Well, that's how we are as humans, right? I mean, I'm sure you can think of things that happened to you that your parents did, and then
Yes.
you rebelled against. I mean, I remember when I was younger, and I was mandated to go to Scouts, and so I would get dropped off at Scouts, and I would kind of do what I suggested a minute ago. I would disappear. I'd go find other places to be, and then I would show up at the end, and then go home with my parents, and
As if you'd been a Scout the whole
yes,
time. I was Scouts. Great.
yeah, and it got me not very far before my parents found out and got in trouble. But you know, I found ways around it because it wasn't my agenda; it was my parents' agenda.
Right. Okay.
So a lot of things can manifest between them getting angry, aggressive, quitting, fighting against it, causing problems, because it's your agenda.
So it's not, and it's not having the agenda, but in that first step, noticing that it's there,
Mm-hmm.
and
Pausing it.
pausing it, or attempting to kind of
Put it to the
put
side.
it to the side. Okay.
Because the reality is your child probably already has some of those arguments within themselves already. They already know, yeah, that's a huge deal to get that scholarship. Or yeah, it's a big deal to have these opportunities. Yeah, I'm really good at tennis and everybody loves the fact I'm good at tennis. They probably already see all of that.
It's true. I'm sure I've already said that to them many times if I'm their parent.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that we need to shove it in their face again or push it or get them to see our way, because that's not going to be helpful. So all we're trying to do is pause that. Recognize what it is so that we can pause it. If you don't recognize it, it's very difficult to put a pause.
Yeah.
But put a pause on that, put a hold, and instead we're going to start trying to build some empathy. Right? So now that we have the agenda identified, we're pausing that, let's start identifying the empathy. So what do you remember on how do we start building that empathy? What do we do?
Asking questions.
Right.
Using the ors.
Right. So we want to start using those open-ended questions and get their perspective. So what might be the child's perspective?
Well, I suppose that's the question I need to ask them.
Might be.
is
But
what's-
for our situation, what might it be? Let's just do hypothetical.
They just don't love it as much as they used to.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they're discovering new likes. I know, I guess if I try to put myself in their shoes a little bit, which I remember you describing as empathy,
Mhm.
I remember actually going through some big changes at that time in my life too. I actually developed a little bit later. Hormones kicked in more so my junior, senior year than any time earlier, and my interests actually changed quite a bit around that time. I don't know. I could imagine that that's a possibility.
And as you changed as a person, your likes, dislikes changed.
Mm-hmm.
And some things, did you find some things you stopped in life and other things you started, new things?
Yeah, actually, I was very good at soccer. Even played a little bit of, had an opportunity at a semi-professional soccer league in England,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want to. Even though I was good, I didn't want to do it anymore. And I thought all the way up to that point, actually I remember now even saying this out loud, that I sometimes even imagined myself a professional soccer player because I loved it so much. And then that love wasn't there anymore. Didn't want to do it.
And are you worse off because you didn't?
I don't believe so.
Right.
Yeah.
So sometimes our prediction or our agenda for someone's future doesn't equate what their future really will be. And it doesn't mean it's a bad future, right? You found things that you loved since then.
Yeah.
And we're humans, we change. Our passions change, things change. So having empathy for our child being in the same boat and recognizing, yeah, I can appreciate that, right? I know what that feels like. And I know what it feels like to look at something that sure has a lot of great benefits, but it's not the path I want to go down.
So in this particular case, I was kind of rather surprised by how easily it came about in me, and maybe other parents would be similar, that empathy would arise rather, it would come up kind of easily, or be
Mhm.
very accessible to them in imagining what might be going on for their child. What about in situations where it's a little bit more challenging?
Yeah, so you might have to ask a few or more open-ended questions. So if I were in your shoes, right, and if I was working with a child in the situation you talked about, I might ask a few more open-ended questions. I might ask questions like, well, what do you see happening if you change gears? Or what passions do you have now? What are some of the consequences if you don't continue out tennis?
I don't know. What if they said, so if you were asking me those questions and think about some challenging responses, they just kind of shrugged their shoulders and said they didn't know right now.
Well, then this goes into some of the skills of what we talk about if you go through all of MI Lead and learn how those skills can influence the way you parent. I'll touch upon them here, but typically you'll want to go through the whole training to really know what to do. But I might reflect some of that information, allow them to be in the space that they're in. And I might say, so you really have no idea what may or may not happen.
I can feel the power of that right away, because I think at first it's just sort of possibly just kind of a lip service response, but maybe I do actually have something, and you reflecting that back, well, no, not totally, I just don't want to do tennis anymore. Actually, I might have some ideas.
Yeah, and then it gives me a chance to say, well, what do those ideas look like?
That's really helpful.
And I might ask questions of, how do you feel with stepping away from tennis and losing the scholarship and losing some of these things? And I can learn from the child. They might tell me, I really don't care because I really want to go into medicine and become a doctor, so just not interested in tennis anymore. And I get that it'll give me a scholarship, but there's other ways to get scholarships. Wow, maybe my kid has really thought this out. They may not have, they might have just said, I don't know, I got a girlfriend now that tennis has taken up my time, I want to go be with my girlfriend. Oh, okay, well, maybe we need to have some empathy around that too, and start recognizing the times we fell in love and how that impacted our life, right? But either way, going back to your question, we might want to ask more open-ended questions to learn more about what's going on with them, what's making them tick, what is the value in them, what's their values that's directing some of their choices right now. So we get a better idea. As we do that, if we feel like we're still not getting empathy, normally that's because we still have some judgments and agendas in the way. So you might have to stop and reflect going, okay, what's stopping me here?
Yeah.
What am I judging here? Because normally it's because I still am so focused on what I want them to do or my judging of what they are trying to do that I can't hear them fully. And I can't go, oh, I know how that feels. I've been there. I know how it feels when I start changing my opinions and feelings. I know how it feels that when I start falling in love with someone or whatever the reason is. We're stopping ourselves from going into that space for some judgment, some agenda that we're pushing still. Often it comes from fear that they won't be accountable to what we want them to be accountable to. And we need to let that go because this is just a discussion. And having empathy does not mean no accountability. It just means we're having empathy to know what that experience, what that feeling, what it's like to be in the spot they're in.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that'd still be my judgment, is that they're irresponsible if they're not considering all the ramifications of this.
Right.
And so I can feel how that would create this, it would be very challenging to feel any empathy for anybody if I still have my, as you said, the agenda or judgment of something being of my opinion being of greater value, or the way I see it, or what I think I know is best being of far more importance than what they might think.
And I don't have to fix them, right? There's nothing I have to fix. If they say things that I 100% disagree with, I don't have to fix that. I can just hear them. I can be curious about it, right? I can ask more questions about it and learn, and really identify where is that coming from, so then I can get a better understanding where it is, so then I can connect it. Because normally decisions made as humans, it all drives down to some core things that we can normally all connect on.
Now I could appreciate that might be a rather challenging piece there, not to try and fix. Especially, I mean, I can imagine some of the wild things I said as a teenager or as a thinking I was an adult, so yeah, still a teenager, the wild things I may have said, and that just the almost like an impulse to have to straighten that out. Like that is a misconception or something that anything you would say about that?
Again, you need to put it on pause. That's your judgment. As soon as you recognize it and feel it, you need to put it on pause. And then you need to explore more from them, right? And then kind of identify what is that like. Because the reality is we were all teenagers once. We all made the rash decisions, and what an exciting time when you were a kid. To have those adventures, to have some ways that you get to kind of make some decisions in your life, and you're trying to have that autonomy at that point. You're trying to identify what you are going to be. Right?
So this wanting to fix, if there's something that they say, and it's difficult to put that aside. I mean, I can imagine like some things they could say would be more easy, and then some things are just gonna like have to breathe through. Is there something wrong with me as an adult, or is that sort of?
No,
I mean,
it's normal.
It's
We all have that, right? We've had it our whole lives. Even when you were a teenager, you had those moments. You tried to fix other people. But this is an important point that when we're trying to build empathy and compassion, we need to put that to the side. Be aware of it and stop it, and just be curious about the other person. Build your empathy.
Okay, it's not necessarily that that's going to go away. It's a fairly natural human response.
It's very natural.
And we're trying to train and develop something else here, a way to be with our child or another. I can hear this applying to many other situations as well, where that fixing piece, recognize it may be there, but not to follow, continue to be curious.
Right.
And so then this leads to our third point.
Yeah. So our third point is identifying what is in the best interest of this person. What is in the best interest of our child? So, and that is going to be difficult to identify.
Sure, because I see what I think is most important, or what in their best interest in this case.
Right, in your perspective, their best interest might be to get that scholarship and use it to go to school. And they may not see it that way. Right? So this is where we need to discover what do they feel like is in their best interest. And then help guide that, right? And that's going to be the steps later that I talked about. It's not necessarily compassion in of itself doesn't mean we change anything right at this moment, or that we are changing anything. Compassion is just identifying what is in the best interest and having that desire to be there to help them. But it might be a time on step 3 to explore what is their perspective on what is the best interest, their best outcome, what do they ultimately want to see, right? And helping to pull that out so we get a better picture.
I'm hearing this even in a new way as you're saying it now, that and this important piece that coming to compassion, we're still not taking action. There's not this piece of like I need to do something and that somehow I need to get myself all together so that I can be compassionate about this decision that I don't necessarily agree with. It's not about that. It's actually about really being with them and being able to be with them even more so, and finding out, as you were saying this again, what matters to them, like really matters to them in this situation. What's their desire in making this change? Potentially, I mean, it will change. It is a different direction in their whole life, and why?
Right.
Actually connecting to it in a.
Because if I am in the mindset, this is just an example, right? If I'm in the mindset that my child is in the best interest to get that scholarship, but the scholarship's only at a school that has no medical school, and they want to go to medical school, well, shoot, then my agenda and what I think is the best interest really isn't, right? The best interest for them might be helping them figure out ways to get scholarships for the medical school, or to start getting connections for that. You know, what is really the best interest of this child, and how do we help them, right? And that's going to be the next piece again. Compassion isn't that we are going to help them necessarily. It's the desire to be compassionate, to be there, to help move forward with that best interest. And as we take actions afterwards, we want to have compassion within those actions, right? So as we go forward of always putting their best interest first as we move forward to help them, guide them, work with them. So compassion has to stay there as we work with them.
Yeah, I'm hearing this all, the piece of having this deeper understanding. You touched on this earlier too, of now having this perspective for what they may already be role playing all this in their heads, what even concerned about what my judgments are going to be, and having all these additional pressures and having compassion on all that they're actually wrestling with in this decision to step away from this potential thing to follow this newfound interest,
Right.
or something else that actually makes them tick.
Correct. And the reality is when we take away our compassion and we just push our agenda, we might end up either severing our relationship, making it so they don't talk to us or they go their own path anyways. We might win and force them to do what we wanted them to do, but then how successful would they be, because it's not what they wanted to do? And how long will it last? Oftentimes if we don't have passion ourselves into something, it doesn't last.
No.
And so we force someone to do our passion instead of their passion, and we end up with problems. But if we have compassion for their situation, what's going on and how they're wanting to go forward, they're more likely to converse with us. They might still go the tennis route. We don't know at this point. But having compassion for their situation and their perspective and what's going on, having that empathy and then compassion, wanting the best for them and what's their best interest, gives us the best opportunity to end up with a good outcome. Not what we thought was the right outcome, but a good outcome.
This is helpful, and I'm appreciating even more how nuanced this understanding of compassion is, and even thinking to day-to-day life, how seldom it comes up in perhaps conversation or in many of our general day-to-day life and understanding our relationships. And I can appreciate that this might be a little bit of a difficult subject to kind of really get a sense of, potentially, for some.
Remember,
And
you've got to be courageous to be compassionate.
yeah. So curious, how might others who are still kind of trying to really land in this component of the spirit of MI get some further guidance, some further instruction and help?
Yeah, so, it's always important to be practicing. So it's a new skill if you haven't been doing it before, to be out there trying to do it, seeing how well you can do it. Look for feedback from others, be careful with feedback. But if you really want to develop the skills, there's a couple different things. One is go through the bigger, broader training on how to be a motivational parent and how to take those MI lead skills and utilize them to influence the way you parent. But the other thing is to schedule some consultation. If you're working with us, we can help you identify what you are doing, how to make modifications, give coaching on that, give you a bigger perspective on all the skills and how to be utilizing them to be effective.
So this would be a place where I could bring up very personal examples and work through them step by step.
Right.
Outstanding. Sounds like a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.